According to the Legal Information Institute, the First Amendment states, quote, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and the petition the government for the redress of grievances. You may think, how does the Patriot Act, that was designed to avoid other attacks similar to 9/11, abuse the First Amendment? According to an article called USA Patriot Act, written by Lisa Fritscher, the Patriot Act allows government agencies to monitor the daily life of not only suspected terrorists, but of any American, either in the States or abroad. I don't know about you, but if I knew that the government could spy on me at any time and suspect me of terrorism solely because of my choice of words, I would choose what I said more wisely. An example of this, if you were to go into an airport and blurt out the word bomb, I can assure you that the guards would not take that too lightly. The Patriot Act not only allows wiretapping, like my colleague Cody mentioned, but according to an article written on the Keene University's website, the Patriot Act allows the FBI to research personal information, listen to private phone calls, and even read their emails. All of this is done without the permission of a judge. The Patriot Act violates the First Amendment of the Constitution because people aren't willing to say what they want in fear of being prosecuted. Later, the article says, quote, the First Amendment emphasizes very important issues of free speech, free press, and free expression, and the Patriot Act, in the way of denying people the right to freely act upon governmental and political issues, ruin these. The First Amendment is not the only amendment that is violated, but also the Fourth Amendment, which states, quote, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized, quoted by FindLaw.com. The Fourth Amendment clearly states the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. Doesn't the Patriot Act allow illegal searches? In an article written by CCAPA, or the Concerted Citizens Against the Patriot Act, it states the Fourth Amendment, and then next to it writes, quote, the Patriot Act violates the freedom from unreasonable searches because the government may search and seize Americans' papers and effects without probable cause to assist terror investigation, end quote. According to an article written by the American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, the Patriot Act violates the Fourth Amendment because these searches can all be done without the person's knowledge, at least until the search is finished. Also, officers may enter a house, apartment, office, etc., with a search warrant while the person is away. They can go through their property, take photographs, and even take property as, quote, evidence. You may think, well, at least they have a warrant, but the problem with this is that at least people, when they are home, they have the right to look at the warrant and point out incorrect information and prevent the search from happening. An example of this would be a warrant for a stolen car, and the police are searching inside of a home. Also found on ACLU's website. If the police do end up finding something from this search, the person whose home they were searching may be charged without even knowing the search ever happened, and that person may not defend his or her rights. This unknown search is also called the sneak and peek. Again, this means that a search can be conducted without the target or ever having knowledge of it. An article called Patriot Act Sneak and Peek searches targeted drug offenders, not terrorists, shared that, quote, of 763 sneak and peek search warrants issued in 2008, only 3 were issued in relation to alleged terrorist offenses, or less than 0.5%. Nearly 2/3, or 62%, were issued to investigate drug trafficking offenses. A quote in this article said by Senator Russ Feingold, a leading critic of the Patriot Act, states, quote, as I recall, it was something called the U.S. Patriot Act, which was passed in a rush after an attack of 9/11. That had to do with terrorism. It didn't have to do with the regular run-of-the-mill criminal cases. Let me tell you why I'm concerned about these numbers. That's not how this was sold to the American people. It was sold as stated on the DOJ's website in 2005 as being necessary, quote, to conduct investigations without tipping off the terrorists, end quote. In conclusion, the Patriot Act is not only unconstitutional, but it gives too much power to the government. The government is abusing the Patriot Act and is using it for more than drug trafficking, more than anything else. The Patriot Act was designed to prevent terrorist attacks like 9/11 to ever happen again. Abusing its power to arrest drug addicts doesn't help avoid terrorist attacks. The Patriot Act should be illegal, it is unconstitutional, and it isn't doing its purpose.
The negative side rejects the proposal. Be it resolved that the United States Congress repeal sections 206, 213, and 412 of the USA Patriot Act. My colleague Hannah already told you how the USA Patriot Act came to be and why it was enacted. It is necessary to keep sections 206, 213, 412 in effect to deter terrorist attacks that may threaten national security and safety of America. When the USA Patriot Act was up for renewal in 2009, FBI Director Robert S. Mueller III encouraged lawmakers to extend the measures in the USA Patriot Act, which allowed gathering of intelligence. Mueller called them exceptional tools for helping protect national security, according to an article by Kerry Johnson in the Washington Post. Section 206 of the Patriot Act, enabling roving wiretaps, is quite necessary to keep in effect for deterring terrorism and protecting national security. Section 206 enables Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court to authorize roving surveillance when it finds that a target's actions may thwart the identification of a communications company or another person whose assistance may be needed to carry out surveillance. Allowing roving wiretaps is crucial to thwart intentions of a terrorist group. Under the provision, one warrant is able to cover all machines used by a person. This prevents people who are trained to evade surveillance or snaking away from the United States. Intelligence officers and sophisticated international terrorists are trained to do things like switch cell phones every now and then to prevent anybody from tapping them and thwarting their plans. So basically the Patriot Act, Section 206, says basically that we as a country, the United States government, can I'm winging this now. Can oh, all right. I woke up pretty early to finish this. 3 a.m. All right. The 2nd, 5th, and 9th Federal Circuit Courts have ruled squarely that roving wiretaps are flawlessly consistent with the 4th Amendment, according to Dispelling the Myths on Justice.gov. Mueller stated, in the past, authorities had to seek court approvals for each electronic device carried by a suspect, from a cell phone and a BlackBerry to a home computer. But under the provision, one warrant can cover all of those machines, according to the Washington Post. Section 206 simply lets counterterrorism agents use some of the same techniques that ordinary criminal investigators have been using for decades, techniques that the federal courts repeatedly have upheld, according to Nathan A. Sales, a professor of law at George Mason University and former Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Office of Policy at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Authority to use roving wiretaps for drug cases has been in existence for 26 years, since 1986, when the Electronic Communications Privacy Act was passed. Obviously, spies and terrorists may be just as able at thwarting surveillance as drug kingpins and mob bosses, if not more so. Section 206 of the Patriot Act permits investigators to use the same technique as law enforcement and the Electronic Communications Privacy Act. If a roving wiretap is good enough for fictional mob boss Tony Soprano, it should be good enough. It should be good enough for 9/11 terrorist Mohammed Atta. Congress concluded. There are safeguards for civil liberty in order to protect privacy for citizens in Section 206. A court order is due prior to any surveillance. FBI agents must appear before the Federal Intelligence Surveillance Court and convince a federal judge that a target is a foreign power or an agent of a foreign power. And that's, again, according to Nathan A. Sales in an article entitled Espionage and Surveillance. Surveillance of which a target is described, but the precise facilities or the name of a target is not indicated, is called a John Doe roving wiretap. If investigators do not yet know a supposed target's name, they still must provide the FISA court with a description of the specific target, which might include the names of the terrorists, associates, his age, his country of origin, or other biographical information. And investigators are still required to present probable cause of a target being a foreign power or an agent of a foreign power. They can't just go and say, oh, well, we heard this in passing, so, Muhammad is actually going to bomb the White House tomorrow. They've got to have probable cause. Terrorism is a frightening part of reality that is ever prevalent in today's society and a serious threat to America. As we've all seen in our lifetimes, on September 11th, 2001, we all know what happened. Section 206 only fortifies the national security of America and should remain in effect. The USA Patriot Act should not be repealed. The repeal of the Patriot Act would weaken national security of America and invite terrorism to this country. And I'd just like to apologize slightly.